Welcome back to The Explainer. I'm really thrilled to have you here today because we're going to unpack something honestly quite fascinating. We're going to explore the complete biological and chemical transformation of raw, simple agricultural ingredients into one of the absolute oldest and most beloved beverages in human history, beer. From the farm all the way to the glass in your hand, you're about to see a masterclass in chemistry, biology, and, well, a whole lot of patience.
But before we get into the heavy machinery and all the complex science, I just want you to think about this number for a second. 4, right? Whether you're drinking a super light, crisp lager on a sweltering summer day or sipping a heavy, rich stout in the dead of winter, every complex beer in the world ultimately comes down to a magical combination of just 4 simple ingredients. It's actually astonishing that so much variety can stem from such a remarkably basic foundation.
Okay, so here's our game plan for today. We're going to cover the 4 essential ingredients: preparing the grain, extracting the sweet liquid, boiling and hopping, fermentation and maturation, and finally, packaging the final pour.
Let's dive right into part 1, the 4 essential ingredients.
So, before the actual cooking process begins, let's meet our cast of characters. And this might genuinely surprise you, but beer is basically 90% water. It's essentially fancy water. What that means is the local mineral content of that water fundamentally alters the taste. That's exactly why certain geographic regions historically became famous for their signature beer styles. The whole shebang literally starts with the local water. Now, what about that other 10%? Well, first we have malted barley, which is our primary sugar source. Depending on exactly how long it's roasted, it totally dictates whether your beer is going to be light or dark. Next up are hops. These are incredible little flowers that add a crucial bitterness to balance out all that sugary malt, along with bringing some really unique aromas. And finally, yeast. This is our living ingredient. It's a microscopic, sugar-hungry little workhorse that actually transforms the malt sugar into alcohol and carbon dioxide.
Moving right along to part 2, preparing the grain.
The actual physical journey kicks off with step 1, malting. We soak the raw barley in water to intentionally trick it into germinating. It's basically a biological hack to awaken the enzymes we need to unlock the grain's starches. Once they're awake, we dry the grains in a kiln to stop that germination right in its tracks. Then we hit step 2, milling. Here we physically crush the malt. This increases the surface area, which ensures our newly awakened enzymes can work super efficiently in the very next stage.
And that milling process? It gives us a highly specific vocabulary word: grist. Grist is the coarse powder that gets created when the malted barley is totally crushed. I really want to highlight this because creating grist is an absolutely vital physical change. We simply cannot extract those vital fermentable sugars locked inside the malt until the grain has been properly broken open into this powder.
All right, let's look at part 3, extracting the sweet liquid.
When we combine our grist and water, we create something called wort. This is a massive concept to grasp. Wort is essentially a highly concentrated, sugary pre-beer liquid. We make it in a huge vessel called a mash tun, where hot water activates those malt enzymes we were just talking about, allowing them to rapidly break down all those complex starches into simple fermentable sugars. Wort is literally the foundation of the entire brew.
So, step 3 is mashing. And listen, temperature is absolutely everything here. A lower mash temperature is going to give you a lighter beer, while higher heat creates a much fuller body. Right after mashing, we hit step 4, lautering. You can think of this kind of like a massive French press for coffee. The sweet wort gets separated from the grain husks. We then pour hot water right over the grain bed, a process brewers call sparging, to meticulously rinse out every single last drop of sugar until we've collected a beautiful, clear wort.
Which takes us right into part 4, boiling, hopping, and flavor.
Now that clear, sweet wort moves into a massive kettle to be sterilized and flavored. And what's really interesting here is the timing. The specific timing of when you add the hops completely alters the final character of the beer. Hops added at the very beginning boil the longest, imparting a really deep bitterness to counteract all that sugar. Flavor hops get added later on for distinctive tastes. And finally, aroma hops are dropped in right at the tail end to leave a fragrant scent profile without actually adding any extra bitterness.
Moving on to part 5, fermentation and maturation.
Step 6 is fermentation. Honestly, this is where the magic truly happens. Once we add the yeast to the cool-down wort in a fermentation tank, it immediately gets to work consuming all those simple sugars we just spent so much time extracting. As the yeast eats the sugar, it produces 2 extremely vital byproducts: alcohol and carbon dioxide.
This multi-day and sometimes multi-week biological step is where a sweet liquid officially and scientifically becomes alcoholic beer.
But hey, not all yeast is created equal. The specific strain of yeast you choose and the temperature it needs radically changes what ends up in your glass. Ale yeast loves warmer temperatures, usually between 65 and 72 degrees Fahrenheit. It works super fast and creates very fruity, complex flavor profiles. Lager yeast, on the flip side, prefers a much cooler environment, between 45 and 55 degrees. It works a lot slower and produces those incredibly clean, crisp-tasting beers. The yeast is basically acting as a master flavor architect.
This builds perfectly into step 7, maturation. The beer just needs to rest, sometimes down near freezing, for weeks or even months. This resting phase allows all those complex flavors to marry together, and the residual yeast settles out, leaving a beautifully clear liquid behind. For popular styles like IPAs, brewers might use a technique called dry hopping right here. That's where they add extra hops to the cold beer to infuse a massive aromatic punch without extracting any extra bitterness.
And at long last, Part 6, packaging the final pour.
Step 8 is all about precision and preservation. The mature beer is usually filtered one last time to remove any tiny remaining particles so you get perfect clarity. Then, it has to be carbonated, either naturally through a secondary mini-fermentation or artificially by injecting CO2 directly into it. Finally, the beer is carefully packaged into bottles, cans, or kegs, sealed up tight against any oxygen and labeled. This meticulous packaging ensures the final product retains all of its carefully crafted flavor and carbonation for distribution.
And there you have it, folks, the complete 8-step journey from the farm to your glass. We've seen exactly how water, malt, hops, and yeast undergo an incredible sequence of malting, mashing, boiling, and fermenting to create something truly extraordinary. So I'm going to leave you with this final thought. The next time you sit down to enjoy a pint, just take a second before you drink. Look at the color, smell the aroma, and ask yourself, which of those 4 magical ingredients are you going to taste first? Thanks for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.